The Nature of Reality by Joe Bandra. Welcome to Conversations That Awaken, a podcast where science, philosophy, psychology, mysticism, and direct experience come together to explore life's deepest questions. What is reality? Who are you beyond your thoughts, beliefs, and stories? Is consciousness merely a product of the brain, or is it the very foundation of existence itself? Join us as we journey beyond assumptions, challenge conventional thinking, and investigate the mysteries that have fascinated humanity for thousands of years. This is more than a conversation. It is an invitation to awaken to a deeper understanding of yourself, the universe, and the extraordinary reality we all share. Welcome to Conversations That Awaken.
I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, I mean, obviously not if you're driving.
Right, yeah, keep your eyes on the road.
Exactly. But mentally, put yourself back in a very specific place. You are a child again. You're sitting at the family dinner table. Maybe there's the clinking of silverware, that murmur of adult conversation, the smell of whatever was just pulled out of the oven. And someone at that table, maybe your mom or a grandparent, tells you very simply that God made everything.
It's a classic moment.
It is. They say, God made the trees, the stars, the dog sleeping under the table, you, me, everything.
Right.
And you, possessing that incredibly sharp, totally ruthless mind of a child, ask what is arguably the most natural yet absolutely devastating question in human history.
Oh, I know where this is going.
You look up, totally innocent, and you ask, but who made God?
It really is the ultimate conversation stopper, isn't it? You can practically hear the forks hit the plates.
Yes, you really can. And, I mean, what happens next? The adults usually just brush it off.
Yeah, they give you that slight patronizing smile.
Right. They smile and say, no one. God always existed. God doesn't have a beginning. And something in your young mind just sort of accepts that because, well, you have to.
Sure, because nobody at the table had a better answer. The concept was way too huge for your brain to process, dinner was getting cold, and life just moved on.
Exactly. But what if we didn't let it move on?
Okay.
What if we actually tried to answer it today? Because that's our mission for this deep dive. What if we applied the coldest, most relentless modern logic to that exact child's question?
It's a fascinating premise because when you do that, when you actually pull that thread, the entire foundation of how we understand reality starts to unravel. And in some incredibly surprising way.
It really is. And I want to set the tone here right up front. This isn't an attack on anyone's beliefs.
No, not at all.
We are doing a rigorous, totally impartial exploration of our source material today. We're looking at a philosophical document that uses pure logic to deconstruct the concept of a creator. And then we'll contrast that with 5 profound mystic thinkers.
Right. People like Yogananda, Maharishi, Krishnamurti, Osho, and Joe Bandra.
Exactly.
Okay.
We want to give you a shortcut to being deeply well-informed on this ultimate metaphysical debate. So let's jump in. That innocent question for the dinner table.
It contains a logical paradox that has plagued the greatest minds for millennia.
It really has.
And it's fascinating because that instinct, the child's instinct to ask what caused this, it's universally hardwired into human consciousness.
Yeah, you see it everywhere.
You really do. If you look across the entire span of human history, across every continent, spanning thousands of years, civilizations that had absolutely no contact with one another independently arrived at the exact same intellectual starting point.
Because they all looked up at the night sky, right?
Exactly. They looked at the complexity of the seasons, the human body, the migration of animals, and they concluded that something must have started it all.
It's like this global human consensus.
Right. Something must be the ultimate foundation beneath all the other foundations.
I mean, the ancient Egyptians looked at the life-giving predictability of the Nile and the waning sun and arrived at Ra, the supreme creator. The Abrahamic traditions obviously center entirely on a personal, singular God who speaks the universe into existence. But even when you move away from the Middle East, the pattern holds perfectly.
It does. Consider ancient Greek philosophy. Aristotle wasn't relying on religious scripture. He was relying on pure observation of the natural world.
Just looking at how things work.
Exactly. He observed that everything in the physical world is in motion, and everything that is moving is being moved by something else.
Like a rock rolling down a hill.
Right. A rock rolls down a hill because it was dislodged by the wind. The wind blows because of temperature differentials in the atmosphere. Those differentials are caused by the sun, and so on.
So it's just a chain.
A chain of motion. And Aristotle reasoned that this chain could not stretch backward into infinity. His logical mind rejected an infinite regress.
He needed a starting point.
Right. He argued there had to be a primum movens, an unmoved mover, a primary source of motion that itself does not move and has no prior cause.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you see a very similar foundational concept in the East too, right?
Yeah.
But with a completely different flavor.
Very different flavor, but the exact same structural necessity. In ancient Hindu philosophy, specifically within the Vedic texts, you find the concept of Brahman.
And that's not like a person in the sky.
No, Brahman isn't a person with a beard sitting on a cloud. It is described as the infinite uncaused consciousness, the absolute reality from which the illusion of the material world emanates.
Oh, wow.
And in ancient Chinese cosmology, the foundational principle is the Tao. The Tao is the source of all things, the underlying natural order of the universe.
But the Tao itself has no source.
Exactly. It just is.
Right.
Every culture looked at this staggeringly complex universe and said, this could not have simply made itself. There has to be an anchor.
And I think it's really important to stop here and admit that this instinct makes total sense. It's not stupid.
Not at all.
Because it's easy for modern secular people to look back at ancient cultures and think, oh, they were just making up primitive fairy tales to explain thunder or why the crops failed.
Right, slapping a myth on something they didn't understand.
Yeah, but the demand for an explanation when we observe complexity and order, that is a completely legitimate intellectual reflex.
It is the exact reflex that drives all scientific inquiry today. Philosophers formally call it the cosmological argument.
Okay, how does that work formally?
The core premise is incredibly straightforward. If everything that exists in our observable reality has a cause, which, as far as we can tell, it absolutely does, then the chain of those causes cannot go backward forever.
It has to terminate somewhere.
It must. It has to end in something that is itself uncaused, something internal, something that exists necessarily rather than contingently.
Meaning it exists because it has to exist, not because something else made it exist.
Precisely. The logic that tells you a functioning pocket watch found in the desert implies a watchmaker is the exact same underlying logic that allows an astrophysicist to look at cosmic microwave background radiation and infer the Big Bang.
You're looking at an effect and demanding a cause.
Yes, that is the engine of human progress.
But wait, if we are applying that engine, this strict rule of cause and effect to the universe, doesn't introducing God just kick the can down the road?
Ah, now we're getting to it.
Because I feel like we're trying to solve a mystery by introducing an even bigger mystery. Our source material has this great analogy.
Well, a desk lamp one.
Yes. If I'm trying to figure out how a single desk lamp in my room works, and I trace the wire to the wall, and someone says, oh, the power comes from the sun powering the solar grid.
Which is true.
Right, that's true. The sun lights the lamp. But by accepting that answer and walking away, I'm conveniently ignoring where the massive, burning, impossibly complex sun came from in the first place.
You've just stopped investigating.
We just say, the sun just is. We haven't actually solved the origin of light. We've just pointed to a really big light and stopped asking questions.
That is an excellent analogy, and it brings us exactly to the crucial pivot, the hidden trap that silently breaks the entire traditional cosmological argument.
The complexity trap.
Exactly. Most people, once they reach the concept of God, or the first cause, they just turn off that engine of inquiry. But if we keep the engine running, if we apply that exact same legitimate intellectual reflex to the first cause itself, what happens?
We fall right into that trap. This is the part that really broke my brain when I first started digging into this. We ask, why does the explanation stop at God? And the traditional answer is, well, God is the uncaused cause.
But that creates a massive explanatory double standard.
Let's break down that double standard.
Okay, so we look at the universe, and we are deeply troubled by the fact that it exists at all. We look at the delicate balance of gravity, the intricate structure of a single living cell, the formation of galaxies.
And we say, this is too complex.
Right. We say this is too complex, too ordered to just be an accident. It demands an explanation. So to satisfy that very valid intellectual demand, we invoke a creator. We invoke God.
But now God exists in our framework of reality. And if we look at how God is traditionally defined in almost all theology, we are talking about a being who is infinitely complex.
Unimaginably complex.
We're talking about an entity that allegedly knows the position of every single atom in the universe simultaneously. that hears the inner thoughts of billions of human beings at once, that exists outside of time, calculates quantum probabilities effortlessly.
Oh, has the capacity to feel love, execute judgment, and formulate divine plans.
That is the most staggering, incomprehensible level of complexity imaginable.
It is. The philosopher David Hume noticed this exact problem centuries ago, and his observation remains utterly devastating to the traditional argument.
What was his critique?
Hume formulated a critique based on what is known as an infinite regress. He pointed out the massive contradiction you just identified. If the physical universe is so incredibly improbable and complex that it absolutely requires an intelligent designer,
then logically the designer has to be even more complex.
Exactly. A designer capable of conceptualizing, engineering, and maintaining that universe must be substantially more complex than the universe itself.
Which makes sense from an engineering perspective, right? Like, you can't build something that is more complex than your own capacity to understand it. A human brain is vastly more complex than the smartphone it invents.
Right. So Hume argued, if complexity requires an explanation, then the designer is even more improbable than the universe, and therefore requires an even bigger, more intelligent designer to explain its existence.
And then that bigger designer needs a designer.
And that bigger designer, being even more complex, would require an even bigger one. This stretches backward forever, an infinite regress.
So the rule we use to prove God, that complexity requires a creator, actually disproves God because it makes God impossible to explain without another God.
It creates a fatal contradiction. The central question is this: if complexity demands an explanation when we find it in physical matter, why does that exact same demand suddenly vanish when we apply it to a divine mind?
Why does the pressure just evaporate?
Exactly. Why does the explanatory pressure just evaporate the moment we utter the word God?
Now, I know theologians haven't just ignored this problem. I mean, they've been arguing this for centuries. They have a defense. I've read about this concept of divine simplicity.
Yes, Thomas Aquinas is famous for this.
Right. They argue that God isn't actually complex at all. God is completely simple. Not simple as in unintelligent, but simple in a philosophical sense, meaning God is not composed of parts. God is just one unified, indivisible essence.
Yes, that is the doctrine of divine simplicity. The argument is that anything made of parts needs a creator to assemble those parts. Since God has no parts, he needs no assembler.
I'm sorry, but I have to push back on that hard. That sounds like a massive cop-out to me.
It really does sound like playing linguistic word games.
Totally. You can't just slap the label simple on the most infinitely capable concept ever devised and consider the problem solved. We just established that this being is tracking every subatomic particle and every human emotion across all of time.
Right.
If a computer did a fraction of that, we'd call it infinitely complex. Just declaring, no, it's actually simple by definition, feels like cheating. It's like setting up a rigid rule of physics for the whole universe and then just writing a magical exemption clause for this one specific entity you want to protect.
Your skepticism is incredibly well-founded. Many modern philosophers argue exactly what you are arguing, that divine simplicity is an ad hoc defense.
It's moving the goalposts.
Exactly. Moving the mystery one level up, giving it a new name, and then declaring it off limits by fiat isn't actually an answer. It's just breaking your own logical rule.
Yeah.
The moment you say nothing explains God, he just exists, you have fundamentally abandoned the very premise that led you to invoke God in the first place. The premise that everything that exists requires an explanation.
Because if you're willing to accept that a massively complex, omniscient mind could just exist without a cause, why not just save a step and say the vastly less complex early universe just existed without a cause?
Exactly. Why add the extra layer?
Wow. Okay, so pure logical deduction seems to trap us in a corner. But I want to make sure we're being intellectually honest here. We can't just attack the weakest, most ancient version of the argument.
No, we have to look at the modern versions.
What happens when we look at the strongest, most modern version of the argument for a creator? Because theology has updated its software, so to speak. It has incorporated modern astrophysics. Does it survive?
This is a vital practice in any serious intellectual pursuit. You must always engage with the strongest version of an opposing idea, steel-manning it, rather than knocking down a weak imitation.
So what's the steel man here?
The strongest, most scientifically integrated version of this argument today is known as the Kalam cosmological argument. It's famously championed by philosophers like William Lane Craig.
Okay, let's lay out the Kalam argument, because it really sounds bulletproof the first time you hear it. It has 3 basic steps.
Right.
Premise 1, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Premise 2, the universe began to exist. Conclusion, therefore, the universe has a cause.
It is an incredibly elegant syllogism, and there is genuine intellectual weight here, particularly with that second premise.
The beginning of the universe.
Yes. For a long time, many secular scientists believed in a steady-state universe, the idea that the universe was eternal with no beginning and no end, but modern cosmology shattered that.
We have evidence now.
Overwhelming evidence. The discovery of the expanding universe and the cosmic microwave background radiation provides massive support for the idea that the universe did, in fact, have a beginning. We point to the Big Bang, approximately 13.8 billion years ago.
And the really wild part is what the Big Bang actually means. It wasn't an explosion in space. It was the explosion of space.
Crucial distinction. According to standard models of physics, before that initial singularity, there was no space, there was no matter, and fundamentally, there was no time.
Time didn't exist.
Time itself began at the Big Bang. So the premise that the universe began to exist is heavily supported by our best observations. And if something began, if it popped into existence where previously there was nothing, it is entirely reasonable to demand a cause for that beginning.
So far, the logic tracks perfectly. If the universe started, something started it. But this is where the argument makes a massive leap, right?
It does.
The Kalam argument doesn't just stop at the universe has a cause. The people who push this argument go further. They claim that because space and time were created by this cause, the cause itself must exist outside of space and time.
Right. Spaceless and timeless.
And then they make the jump. They claim this timeless cause must be a personal, conscious agent with a free will.
Yes, that is the crux of the issue, and it is where the argument transitions from physics back into theology. Their reasoning is highly specific.
Let's hear it.
They argue that if the cause of the universe was simply a mechanical set of conditions, like a mindless physical law, and those conditions existed eternally outside of time, then the effect, meaning the universe, would also have to exist eternally.
Wait, can you break that down? Why would a mechanical cause mean an eternal universe?
Think of it like this. If the necessary conditions for a fire to start oxygen, fuel, and heat are all present and eternal, the fire will burn eternally.
Oh, I see.
A mechanical cause automatically produces its effect the moment the conditions are met. If the cause is eternal, the effect is eternal. But we know the universe is not eternal. It started 13.8 billion years ago.
Right.
So the Kalam defenders argue, how do you get a temporal effect, a universe that begins at a specific point from an eternal, timeless cause? They argue the only logical way is if the cause is a mind.
An agent.
Yes, an agent that can choose or decide to act at a specific moment. A mechanical law cannot choose to act. A mind can. Therefore, the first cause is a personal God.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I see the linguistic logic there, but I am totally not buying it. That feels like a massive smuggled assumption.
It's a huge leap.
We jump from an abstract, timeless trigger for the Big Bang all the way to a conscious, personal, willing agent. And historically, that agent quickly gets assigned a gender, a moral code, and an intense interest in who humans sleep with.
It gets very specific very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Why does the cause have to be personal? Even if we grant that it's a mind, why does it have to be a loving God? Why couldn't it be an insane, malevolent mind? Why couldn't it be a committee of a billion different minds? Why couldn't it be an alien simulation?
You're asking all the right questions.
We take a mathematical necessity and suddenly dress it up in intensely human emotions and desires.
You are identifying what philosophers call the gap problem in the cosmological argument. Even if the Kalam argument successfully proves a timeless, spaceless cause, the gap between that abstract cause and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is a canyon of unproven assumptions.
You just can't cross it logically.
None of those personal qualities, love, morality, singularity, follow logically from the premise the universe had a cause. They are entirely human additions, layered on top of a philosophical puzzle to provide psychological comfort.
And it gets even more complicated when we bring modern physics back into the room. Because modern physics actually offers an alternative to God for that uncaused cause, right?
It certainly does.
If the rule is that everything needs a cause, but we are going to allow exactly one exception to that rule to get the universe started, why does that exception have to be God? Why couldn't the exception just be a fundamental law of physics?
This is where we encounter the quantum counterpunch. Modern quantum mechanics fundamentally challenges our everyday, intuitive understanding of cause and effect.
How so?
When we get down to the subatomic level, the strict Aristotelian logic of A causes B starts to break down. We are introduced to the concept of the quantum vacuum.
Okay, I need an ELI 5 in the quantum vacuum. Explain it like I'm 5. Because when I hear vacuum, I think of empty space. I think of absolutely nothing.
It is vital to understand that in physics, a vacuum is not nothing. True philosophical nothingness, the absence of all reality, is a concept physics doesn't really deal with.
So what is it?
A quantum vacuum is empty space, devoid of matter, but it is not empty of energy. It is a seething, dynamic, volatile ocean of underlying energy fields. It is a physical state that fluctuates spontaneously.
Spontaneously.
Yeah.
But without a cause.
Yes. Due to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which is a foundational law of quantum mechanics, you cannot have a system with exactly zero energy. As a result, the quantum vacuum is constantly boiling with what we call virtual particles.
Virtual particles.
These are pairs of particles and antiparticles that spontaneously pop into existence out of the vacuum energy, exist for a fleeting fraction of a microsecond, and then annihilate each other and vanish back into the vacuum.
Wait, particles are literally popping into existence from nowhere, without any trigger.
They are coming from the underlying energy field, but their specific emergence has no prior triggering event in the classical sense. There is no tiny pool cue hitting a subatomic billiard ball.
Wow.
They occur probabilistically. This isn't just theoretical math either. It has been empirically verified. The Casimir effect is a physical force we can measure in a laboratory, and it is caused by these exact virtual particles popping in and out of the vacuum.
So we have an empirically observed, scientifically verified phenomenon that acts precisely as an uncaused cause.
We do. And physicists like Lawrence Krauss have argued that if you have a quantum vacuum and you apply the laws of gravity, it is theoretically possible for an entire universe to spontaneously emerge from that vacuum in a massive fluctuation.
Just boom, a universe.
Right. No divine spark required. The laws of quantum mechanics themselves serve as the uncaused foundation.
But hold on, I have to play devil's advocate against the physicists now.
Go for it.
If the quantum vacuum is full of energy and it has laws like the uncertainty principle governing it,
Yeah.
where did the quantum vacuum come from? Where did those laws come from?
A very fair question.
We are just doing the sun and the desk lamp again. We've just replaced God always existed with the quantum vacuum always existed.
Yeah.
It feels like the exact same explanatory dead end, just using cooler jargon.
That is an incredibly sharp critique, and it is exactly what theologians point out. Saying the universe came from quantum laws doesn't explain why there are quantum laws instead of absolutely nothing.
Right.
However, physics has one more massive conceptual shift to offer regarding the origin of the universe, and it attacks the very concept of a beginning. We need to talk about Stephen Hawking and James Hartle and their concept of imaginary time.
Imaginary time. Okay, that sounds like a sci-fi cop-out. What does that actually mean in physics?
It requires bending your mind around some complex mathematics. In classical physics, time is a one-dimensional line. It goes forward. But Hawking and Hartle used a mathematical trick, imaginary numbers, which involved the square root of -1 to calculate the state of the universe right at the moment of the Big Bang.
And what does that do?
When you convert time into imaginary time in these equations, time essentially becomes just another dimension of space.
Okay, I'm losing you. Time becomes space.
Think of it this way. Instead of a sharp point, a singular beginning, where time suddenly turns on, the history of the universe in imaginary time becomes a closed surface, like a sphere.
A sphere.
It has no edges, no boundaries, and no sharp starting point. It is completely self-contained. Hawking proposed what he called the no-boundary proposal. He argued that the universe is completely finite in its size and history, but it has no boundary or edge.
Okay, I think I'm grasping this. It's like the South Pole.
Yes.
If time is a globe, the Big Bang isn't a sharp point sitting on a table. It's the South Pole of the globe.
That is precisely the analogy Hawking himself used. It is a brilliant spatial analogy for a temporal problem.
Right, because if you are walking south and you eventually reach the exact geographic South Pole, and you ask what is further south from here, the question is meaningless.
Totally meaningless.
If you are standing on the South Pole, no matter which direction you face or which way you step, you are moving north. The very concept of south ceases to apply at that specific coordinate.
Right.
So if time itself is shaped like that, and time began at the Big Bang, asking what happened before the Big Bang is fundamentally asking what is south of the South Pole, the question itself just breaks down. It's a glitch in human language.
Exactly. The universe in this model doesn't need a creator because it doesn't have a distinct beginning that requires a trigger. It simply is. It is a self-contained geometry of space and time.
That's incredible.
Now, this is a theoretical model. It is not proven fact. But
Yeah.
the philosophical takeaway here is profound. We must be intellectually honest and admit that human beings do not currently fully understand the absolute origin of the universe.
We just don't know.
But substituting "we don't know" with "therefore a conscious God did it" is not logic. It is an exercise in wishful thinking.
So we've reached an incredible stalemate. The pure, cold logic of philosophy dismantled the idea of an all-knowing creator existing without a cause. It exposed the complexity trap. But on the other side, quantum mechanics and imaginary time are completely mind-bending, and honestly, they just rename the mystery in the language of mathematics.
Yeah.
It feels like a massive intellectual dead end.
It can definitely feel that way.
Our analytical brains are just spinning their wheels in the mud. So, if Western logic and physics can't definitively solve this, what happens if we change the operating system entirely? How do the world's deepest mystical thinkers react to this exact dead end? Let's bring in the heavyweights.
This is where the conversation shifts radically. We are moving away from frameworks that treat the universe as a giant machine to be figured out, and moving toward philosophies that question the very nature of reality and the identity of the observer.
Who's our first source here?
Let's start with Paramahansa Yogananda, a monumental figure who was instrumental in bringing Vedanta and yoga philosophy to the West in the 20th century.
So if Yogananda sat down at our dinner table, how would he react to our logical dismantling of God? Because he was a deeply spiritual man. Would he just reject our logic?
Interestingly, he wouldn't dismiss the logic at all. Yogananda was highly critical of mechanical, unthinking belief and religious dogma.
Oh.
Yes. He would likely agree with your dismantling of the old man in the sky cliché. But his reaction would be that our entire Western logical approach makes a massive, fundamental category error.
A category error, meaning we're applying the wrong set of rules to the problem, like asking what color mathematics is.
That is a perfect analogy from the text.
If I ask you, what color is the Pythagorean theorem? It sounds like a deep question, but it's actually just nonsense.
Right, because color doesn't apply to math.
Exactly. Color is a property that applies to physical objects reflecting light. Mathematics is an abstract conceptual framework. You're taking a rule from one category and forcefully applying it to a totally different category where it just doesn't belong.
Exactly. Yogananda, operating from an Advaita Vedanta worldview, would argue that causality, cause and effect, beginnings and endings, is a rule that applies exclusively to the manifested physical universe.
It's just a rule for objects in space and time.
Yes. But God, or the Absolute, or Brahman, is not an object within the universe. It is not the biggest gear in the cosmic machine. It is the underlying ground of being from which the concepts of space, time, and causality themselves emerge.
So trying to apply the rule of cause and effect to the absolute reality is asking what color mathematics is. It's a glitch in our thinking.
Yes. And regarding the complexity trap we discussed earlier, Hume's argument that a designer must be infinitely complex. Yogananda would respond that the mistake is imagining the absolute as a complex system of moving parts, like an omniscient supercomputer.
So how does he see it?
In the Vedantic view, the ultimate reality is radically simple. It is pure, undifferentiated consciousness. Multiplicity, complexity, and form only emerge within the illusion of the manifested universe.
Okay, I can grasp that intellectually.
Yeah.
But I want to move to another figure who takes this even further, and honestly, into territory that is really hard for my Western brain to accept. Ramana Maharishi.
Ramana Maharishi is one of the most revered sages of modern India. His approach is breathtakingly direct and completely bypasses theological debate.
What would he say to all this?
If you came to him with the cosmological argument, he would appreciate the relentless inquiry, but he would tell you that you are aiming all of your intellectual firepower at the entirely wrong target. He argued that the fundamental error we make is assuming that reality can be captured conceptually in the first place.
Instead of asking what caused the universe, he demands that we ask, who is asking the question?
Yeah.
He wants us to focus entirely on, who am I?
Exactly.
But I have to push back here. I'm going to push back hard. This sounds like an avoidance tactic.
How so?
If I am trying to figure out the actual physical origin of the cosmos, how galaxies formed, what happened 13.8 billion years ago? How does sitting on a cushion focusing on who am I solve the origin of the physical universe?
It seems disconnected.
Right. I didn't exist 13.8 billion years ago. I'm a 35-year-old person. My consciousness didn't invent the Big Bang. So this feels like changing the subject because he doesn't know the physics.
It absolutely feels that way to the Western analytical mind. Our entire worldview is built on the assumption of an objective, independent universe that exists out there, and we are just small, temporary meat computers walking around inside it.
Exactly.
But I need to explain the Advaita perspective that Maharishi operates from, because it completely flips that assumption. Maharishi would argue that your undeniable foundational fact of existence is not the universe exists out there.
So what is it?
You only know the universe through your senses and your mind. Therefore, the only truly undeniable empirical fact you have is, I am aware.
I think, therefore I am. Descartes.
Even deeper than Descartes. Descartes focused on the thinking. Maharishi focuses on the awareness of the thinking. Every single scientific theory, God, the Big Bang, the quantum vacuum, the laws of logic, the concept of time, every single one of those is a concept appearing inside your consciousness.
Wait, are you saying the universe isn't real? Is this just solipsism?
Yeah.
Like the idea that I'm the only thing that exists and everything is a dream?
Not solipsism. Advaita doesn't say your personal ego created the universe. It says that the ultimate reality is pure consciousness itself, and what we call the universe is an appearance within that consciousness.
That's a huge shift.
It is. The universe and the observer are not two separate things. They are mutually arising. To prove this, Maharishi points to a profound experiment we all undergo every single night. The deep sleep experiment.
Okay, walk me through this.
Every night, you lie down and you enter deep, dreamless sleep. In that state, your mind completely shuts down its conceptualizing. What happens to the universe in that state?
Well, I don't see it anymore.
From your experiential standpoint, the entire cosmos completely disappears. The concept of causality disappears. The Big Bang, the quantum vacuum, your personal history, your anxieties, it all vanishes entirely.
Yes, but the universe is still there. My house doesn't disappear just because I'm asleep.
Ah, but how do you know your house is still there while you are in deep sleep? You only know it's there after you wake up, and your mind boots back up and reconstructs the timeline.
Oh, wow.
During the actual state of deep sleep, the objective world is gone. Yet when you wake up, you do not say that you ceased to exist. You say, I slept deeply. There was a continuity of underlying awareness, even when there were absolutely no objects, no thoughts, and no universe to be aware of.
So Maharishi is saying that this pure objectless awareness is the actual foundation of reality, not the physical atoms.
Exactly. So Maharishi would say that obsessing over the origin of the objective universe is a distraction. Both the statement, God created the universe, and the quantum vacuum created the universe, are ultimately just thoughts, temporary ripples appearing in your awareness.
And what about our logical deconstruction from earlier?
The logical deconstruction we did earlier brilliantly attacks the concept of God, but it leaves the most massive assumption completely untouched. The assumption of the ego, the stance of, I am a separate, independent observer, analyzing a separate, independent reality.
He's challenging the very ground we're standing on.
For Maharishi, that unexamined assumption of separateness is the deepest illusion of all. And until you investigate the I, all cosmological theories are just mental games.
Okay, if we entertain this idea, if exploring the physical origin of the universe is ultimately a projection of the mind, a desperate attempt by the ego to figure out its environment, then we have to ask a deeply psychological question.
Which is?
Why is the human mind so incredibly desperate to find an explanation in the first place? Why do we need the first cause so badly? Why can't we just exist?
That leads perfectly into our next source.
Right, this brings us to a psychological critique, specifically looking at Jiddu Krishnamurti.
Krishnamurti is fascinating here because his critique is entirely psychological, and it is razor sharp. He wouldn't defend religion, but he wouldn't celebrate atheism either.
Where did he stand then?
In fact, he viewed the staunch religious believer and the staunch scientific atheist as operating from the exact same psychological mechanism.
The atheist and the believer are identical.
Mm.
That is a wildly provocative claim. People on both sides of that debate would be furious to hear that.
They would, but Krishnamurti argued that whether you fervently believe there is a God in control, or you fiercely believe there is not a God and science has all the answers, you are fundamentally seeking the exact same thing. Certainty.
You just want to know for sure.
Exactly. You are both operating entirely within the realm of thought, conditioning, and a desperate psychological need for a secure conclusion. You are both trapped in the exact same machinery of the mind.
It's an avoidance mechanism. He's asking this really unsettling question. Are we using these grand, abstract, cosmic debates about the Big Bang, the quantum vacuum, and the existence of God as a way to avoid dealing with our actual immediate reality?
That's exactly his point.
Are we debating cosmology at dinner parties so we don't have to look inward at our own fear of death, our daily anger, our petty ambitions, and our profound existential loneliness?
For Krishnamurti, the human brain craves explanatory closure because living in a state of uncertainty is psychologically intolerable. We want a conclusion because a conclusion feels safe.
It's like a shield.
Yes. We use theories, whether it's theological dogma or scientific materialism, as a shield against the raw, unfiltered immediacy of living. The mind demands a first cause because it is seeking a permanent anchor to secure its own fragile identity.
That perfectly sets up the perspective of Osho, another controversial and brilliant mystic, heavily influenced by Zen and the Buddha. If we brought Osho into this debate, he would absolutely love the logical deconstruction we started with.
Oh, he would eat it up?
He spent decades mocking the traditional concept of God.
Osho would laugh and say, of course theology has always cheated logically. He viewed the traditional God as a psychologically manufactured cosmic policeman designed to enforce morality, and a comforting cosmic blanket we pull over our heads because we are utterly terrified of the dark void of death.
But just like the others, he wouldn't let the atheists win either. He would make a sharp turn. He would say, our rigorous logic destroyed religion intellectually, but it completely misses the dimension of actual experience. He constantly emphasized that existence is not a syllogism to be solved on a whiteboard.
The truth is a pathless land. That was Krishnamurti's famous phrase, but Osho echoed the sentiment deeply. What it means is that no philosophy, no scientific equation, no guru, and no logical system can deliver truth to you secondhand.
You can't just read about it.
Exactly. The intellect is incredibly useful. It's how we build rockets, cure diseases, and map genomes. But Osho would argue that the intellect is entirely too narrow a faculty to contain the vastness of existence itself.
So what does this all mean? This feels like a massive warning. If we use logic to completely tear down the old religious structures, which maybe we have to be incredibly careful that the skeptical intellect doesn't just become our brand new priest.
That's a great way to put it.
We just swap the Pope for a theoretical physicist, but we are still outsourcing our understanding of reality.
That is the ultimate synthesis of Osho's warning. Don't mistake the destruction of illusion for the arrival of truth.
Wow.
You can be the smartest, most logically rigorous atheist on the planet. You can perfectly articulate the infinite regress and imaginary time. But if you lack direct, lived experience states of consciousness like profound inner silence, unconditional love, or egoless ecstasy, then your atheism is just another empty mental toy.
You're just playing games in your head.
Exactly. You've replaced a comforting belief with a cold concept, but you haven't actually tasted reality.
This brings us to a final perspective, a modern framework that seems to perfectly bridge the gap between our analytical search for identity and this ancient non-dual awareness of the mystics. I want to talk about a contemporary philosopher named Joe Bandra, specifically his framework from a book called Finding the Hay.
Bandra's work is an excellent synthesis. He attempts to resolve this agonizing paradox of causation by stepping completely outside of temporal logic, but doing so in a way the modern mind can grasp.
His core thesis addresses the exact wording of our original question: who made God? Bandra points out that this question inherently assumes that God is a thing.
Yeah.
An object.
A physical entity.
Right. The biggest, oldest, most powerful object, sure, but still an object existing inside the universe, subject to the exact same chain of cause and effect as a toaster or a planet.
Yes. Bandra draws a hard line between a being among beings and the ground of being itself. It is a crucial philosophical distinction.
How does that change the argument?
If you conceptualize God as a distinct entity, a highly advanced mind floating somewhere in the multiverse, then yes, the logical demand for who created that mind is 100% valid. The infinite regress destroys that concept.
But what if you don't?
But if you conceptualize the ultimate reality as the ground of being, the fundamental, unconditioned condition that allows the phenomenon of existence to occur at all, then the question of causation collapses under the weight of its own flawed assumptions.
He talks extensively about the difference between the timeless and the temporal. Let me see if I can synthesize Bandra's point with an analogy, building on what we've discussed today.
Sure, go ahead.
The human mind is essentially a highly specialized machine. Its evolutionary software only knows how to process one thing: cause and effect. That's how we survived. We saw a footprint, which is the effect, and deduced a tiger, which is the cause.
Very practical.
Exactly. So when this machine turns its lens onto the totality of existence, it runs its only software. It demands a cause. But the ground of being, or pure awareness, exists before that mental machinery even gets booted up.
The machinery can't capture it.
Right. We are using a temporal tool to try and dissect a timeless reality. We are trying to measure the depth of the ocean with a ruler that only measures minutes.
That is a phenomenal analogy. If we connect Bandra's view back to our primary goal today, understanding this massive historical debate, we see his ultimate point. The trap wasn't a failure of our scientific logic.
The logic works just fine.
The logic of the infinite regress, the cosmological argument, the quantum math, it is all perfectly sound within its own specific domain of space and time. The true trap was identifying entirely with the thoughts, the theories, and the logical processes themselves.
Instead of just recognizing the silent underlying awareness that is currently experiencing those thoughts.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. My brain is officially stretched to its limits. Let's briefly retrace the massive arc of this deep dive.
It's been quite a journey.
We started right back at that childhood dinner table, asking that innocent but profoundly destructive question, who made God?
From there, we walked through the cold, undeniable logic of the cosmological argument. We saw how demanding a cause for the universe inevitably traps us in an infinite regress if we apply that same logic to a creator. We exposed the complexity trap, revealing the double standard of theology.
We looked at the strongest defenses, like the Kalam argument, and exposed the smuggled assumptions hiding within them. Like, why does the trigger of the Big Bang have to be a personal agent?
We visited the absolute frontiers of quantum physics, exploring how uncaused fluctuations in the quantum vacuum and the concept of imaginary time offer mind-bending mathematical alternatives to a divine creator.
And finally, we had our entire perspective flipped by some of the most profound mystic thinkers in history. They reminded us that logic itself, causation itself, and the very physical universe we are trying so desperately to explain are ultimately just thoughts and conceptual experiences appearing in our awareness.
They challenged us to stop obsessing over the origin of the objects out there and instead investigate the fundamental nature of the observer in here.
It is a massive paradigm-altering shift in how you view reality. And as we wrap up this deep dive into these sources, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Let's hear it.
We've spent this entire time dissecting the intellect's valiant attempt to solve the universe. But consider this. What if the very intellect you are using to try and solve the ultimate mystery of existence is the exact thing keeping you from actually experiencing it?
It is a question that invites a completely different kind of exploration, not one of analyzing, but of being.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. It is a powerful reminder that the true pursuit of knowledge isn't just about finding comfortable final answers to put in a textbook. It's a lifelong, thrilling, sometimes terrifying journey of asking deeper, better questions. Until next time, keep questioning everything.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Your support helps us continue exploring the deepest questions of life, consciousness, and reality. I am Julia Carter, and it is my honor to introduce Joe Bandra, author, philosopher, speaker, healthcare technology pioneer, and lifelong explorer of life's questions. Through his writing, Joe bridges science, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and direct experience in a search for truth. His first book, Finding Nevaeh, is a transformative journey of self-discovery and the search for lasting happiness. His second book, Body, Mind, and Machine, chronicles his remarkable career and the evolution of healthcare technology. His next book, The Nature of Reality, explores consciousness, existence, and the mysteries at the heart of human experience. Joe's work invites us to look beyond what we think we know and awaken to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
Life often feels like an endless list of tasks, constant noise and distractions, pulling us in every direction. We're all searching for happiness, but what if we've been looking in the wrong places all along?
This was Nevaeh's journey. Lost in the noise, she felt cut off from the peace and happiness she longed for. Until she met Joe Bandra, an unconventional, insightful philosopher with a different perspective. Jay, as he is simply known, didn't hand her a map. He gave her something far more valuable, a compass, a way to turn inward, navigate her own thoughts, and uncover the clarity hidden beneath the chaos.
Readers around the world have been touched and inspired by finding Nevaeh.
Your journey to inner peace begins now. Get your copy of Finding Nevaeh, available on Amazon and at findingnevaeh.org, or listen to the audiobook on Audible, Spotify, Apple, and other platforms.